Stop scaling your objects. Welcome back. Just kind of wanted to go over kind of introduction, brief intro to 3D modeling type of a situation. A lot of times I see newbies when they're first getting into 3D modeling, 3D software of any sort. They often scale their objects, sometimes into really crazy effects start to happen. So I like to say to anybody that's doing that to stop scaling their objects. You always want to scale on the sub-object level. You never want to change your object at the actual object level, especially in 3ds Max. And I'm going to go over a couple scenarios what I mean by stop scaling your object and to scale it in your sub-object mode instead, whether adding an edit poly or edit mesh, and kind of going over the reasons why. So I just created this cube. It's just like a 5 foot by 5 foot cube, and I'm just going to take this guy and I'm just scaling it down. If you're doing stuff really quickly, sometimes you kind of in the heat of the moment, you just need to scale stuff really fast. It's fine, but overall for modeling, you might come across some weird challenges, weird kind of weirdness going on in your scene. And you might scratching your head why is my texture wrong? Why is my chamfers look wrong? Or my modifiers aren't acting quite properly. And so I just have a couple of materials off on the side here. I'm just going to go ahead and apply these two materials here, and obviously we can see that this material is smaller than this one because I've scaled the objects. I'll go ahead and add a UVW modifier. I'm going to set this to 5 foot by 5 foot, which is the size of our boxes. So this is our scaled object here, and I'm going to go ahead and set our UVW map for the same 5 foot by 5 foot. And so this modifier here controls the actual size of our texture file on our object here. So why do these two look so different, even though I have this UVW modifier map at 5 foot by 5 foot and this one is also at 5 foot, but they look completely different in size of scale? And that is again because we took the object and we scaled it ourselves. And so you can see here, so we're almost just make it 50%. So we're at 50% scale of the object. So even though this UVW modifier map here is respecting the 5 foot, so what you really want to do is you want to add either an edit poly or edit mesh. And if you're going to scale your object, you're going to scale it either your vertices, or you're going to scale your faces or the edges or whatever you want to do. And then you're like, well, but Andrew, I could see the texture file size isn't changing. And that's because the UVW map modifier is respecting the scale of the actual object. So the actual object is still at 100 and not being affected as I scale down the actual sub object. And this is the correct way that you want to scale your objects, is through the sub object. Whether again, if you're in edit poly or edit mesh, either one of those will work. And so this will allow you to add any of your modifiers like UVW map and not get that to conform in funny ways. And so another scenario that scaling objects kind of can mess around with your models is your modifiers. And so I'm going to go ahead and just scale this guy down again. Let's kind of take it down to 50%, and then we're going to add a edit poly onto this, take this down 50% as well. So we have two of the same smaller spheres here, and both of them have been scaled in two different ways, right? I've scaled this one in the sub object level, and I've scaled this one in the object level. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add an edit poly on top of this, and I'm working with it, I'm modifying it, I'm in my models working with whatever I'm doing, and I'm just going to go ahead and extrude this, and I just want to extrude this up 12 inches. And I'm okay, that's cool. I'm working with it. But now I have this object as well, and these faces here, and I'm going to extrude this 12 inches, and I get a completely different result. And why is that? Is because this guy is taking into account the actual scale here of the object itself. So, and we can verify this if I just draw out a box really quickly and just do that, and then I can see my height here is at 1 foot and my extrusion is at 1 foot. But if I go back to this guy that I scaled the actual object, just kind of draw that out, we're at, you know, like 6 inches basically, and that's because our scale of our actual object is off. And so it's like as you're modeling, and if you add like, let's say like a chamfer modifier, and you add like a 1-inch chamfer onto it, and you know it looks good, like okay, fine. And then this one, let's just go ahead and add a chamfer modifier, add 1 inch, and it's, you know, much more of a chamfer. It's because the scale is actually correct on this guy, and so this can cause a lot of issues as you're modeling and kind of working through your projects. So that's why I just kind of like want to throw out there to be really mindful of how you're actually modeling all your objects and your geometry within your scene. Hope that was helpful for somebody out there. This was just kind of like a quick little tip that was off the top of my head that I just wanted to kind of put together for anybody that was curious, or anybody that was interested in, you know, just kind of getting started modeling.